started. So thanks everybody for joining. It's really nice to see so many of you with us today. Thanks for making the time and registering and actually arriving at the webinar. It's really great to see so many people here. For anyone who hasn't met me yet, my name is Liel. I'm a Senior Customer Success Manager here at Comeet, and we are going to start our webinar for today. We're going to talk about prepping your end of the year reports. The goal of this webinar is also to showcase the different reports that can be relevant for your end of the year reporting, and also focus on the different topics and different angles that the data can give you when preparing for those reporting meetings that are coming up soon. As always, our webinars are recorded. We will share them with whoever registered. And of course, they will be updated on our events page. You can also reach the recording via reaching out to our support team. So if you have to log off a little early or you didn't get a chance to join us, you'll receive the recording later on. And I think we're ready to get started. So just to get us started today in terms of thinking about those end of the year reports, there was one question that I wanted to start it off with today, which is, what would be the most important thing, in your opinion, the most important piece of information that you would want to include in your end of the year reporting? So for this, I've prepared a short poll, and it would be great just to see your input. I'm going to share it on the screen right now so you can all see it. And if you can take just like 10 seconds and vote, sort of share your opinion, where you're coming from, what's currently the most interesting thing for you to see in your end of the year reporting, whether it's to sum up the past year, whether it's maybe to discuss next year, identify gaps, anything that really comes to mind out of these 4 options. It would be nice to get your input. Okay, great. So we have some different results here. Looks very good. Thanks for your cooperation. Fantastic. So I'm going to show everybody the results in just a second so you can all see what everybody voted. So here you can see it on the screen. So you can really see that there is a variety of opinions and points of view that people are interested in. Some of you want to talk about summing up the year. Some of you want to showcase the results of the hiring process, discuss the gaps and identify where you can improve, and of course, preparing for next year. So the good news is that all the answers are correct, and we are going to address all of these topics during our webinar today. Of course, we're addressing all of these topics by talking about Comeet Insights, which is our reporting platform. So let's talk about Comeet Insights for a little bit and get started. So this is our agenda for today. We have identified the goals of our webinar and of this webinar for your need. We want to talk about the results. We want to talk about how we got there, and of course, discuss next year and identify gaps and where we want to improve. So we're going to cover all of those topics today. I'll show you a little bit about Comeet Insights, just a general slide to make sure that we're all on the same page. And you can see a list of all of the different relevant reports that we are going to cover in our session today. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video so we can all focus on the screen, and I'll see you a little bit later for Q&A. In general, just so you know that you can feel free to write in the chat or in the Q&A during the webinar, and we will address your questions at the end. Great. So let's talk a little bit about Comeet Insights just to get started. So as most of you know, Comeet Insights is our reporting platform. It's based off of Sysent, which is a well-known BI tool, and it will open up an external page in Comeet. So if you're in Comeet right now and you click on the top right-hand corner, you'll select your company name, and then you'll click Comeet Insights, and that will open a new page for you. There's a few things to know about Comeet Insights just before we get started. First of all, you'll see that Comeet Insights updates once a day. You'll see the time of update at the top part of the screen. We'll see an example in just a sec. So make sure that you're looking at the data in the morning. You'll see that it's been recently updated. Some reports will be dashboards, and some reports will allow you to filter by a specific period of time. So for example, you could look at the sources in a specific year or in a specific week. And you'll have specific dashboards like the position dashboard and the hiring dashboard that will show you the situation as of right now. We're not focusing on dashboards too much today. We're mostly talking about the actual reports. And we're also going to be viewing them for a year view, but I wanted to make sure you're all aware of that as well. We'll also see together that we have on the left-hand side, we'll have different folders. Each folder will have a different report, and we'll see a list of all of the reports. And we'll also be able to minimize and maximize the view of the folders and the filters. The filters on the right-hand side will allow you to filter the reports by lead recruiter, location, department, hiring manager, and various other options. And you'll see that also these reports are available for anyone who is an owner, admin, recruiter, or management on a company level within Comeet. So if you have management that want direct access for the reports, you can give them that permission as well. All the reports can be exported to PDF. You can export specific widgets to smaller images if you want to build your own PowerPoint presentation or create your own sort of custom combination of the different reports and the different tables. You can also export specific tables to Excel and CSV if you want to play around with them a little bit more. So that's just a little bit about Comeet Insights. I do want to mention a few things before we dive in. So first of all, reviewing reports, if it's your first time, it will always be a good opportunity for you to clean up the data a little bit, because every time we go in to reports for the first time, we'll find a position that doesn't have a department. We'll find that we put the wrong hiring manager, we're missing a location. So it's always a good opportunity to review your data. And in any case, if it's not your first time and you have already used the reports, you know the importance of cleaning up your data, entering it on time, making sure that everything is documented correctly. So before you go into the reports that we're going to cover today and start looking for the relevant data, make sure all of your candidates that have been hired have actually been marked hired in the system. Make sure all of your positions have departments, locations. There's a lead recruiter and a hiring manager that's unique per position and relevant according to the team. And really make sure that all of your data is entered correctly before using the reports. Second thing I want to mention is that we're looking at demo data today, so none of this data is actual data. I've actually chosen to show you some of the data for the year 2020 just because I wanted you to see how some of the reports would look like with a yearly view. So you'll see that in the time filter, and of course you'll be able to play around with the time filters by quarters, months, and of course a whole year. And the last thing I want to mention is that not all of the reports are for all of the customers. So if I dive in straight away to our Comeet Insights, it's pretty easy and straightforward to see it from here. So on the left-hand side, as we saw, we have a list of all of the different folders. Each folder has different reports. And if you're seeing specific reports today that you don't have included in your Comeet Insights, that's because it's according to your package with us. So some of you have our Ultimate or Enterprise package, and then you'll have a wider range of reports. In any case, I'll mention which reports are included, and you can always feel free to reach out to our support team for more details, or if you want to update your subscription. At the bottom over here, you can see that you have reports overview. This list will show you the full list of all of reports that are available in Comeet, and it will show you which ones are included in your package. So if you're looking for that information, that's where you want to go. So in terms of filters and using Comeet Insights, here you can see the last updated date. So it'll update usually early in the morning. You'll see the name of the report over here, and you'll also be able to minimize the folders to the left. You'll also be able to do this for the filters if you'd like. And the reports that we're covering today have all time filters included, which means the top right-hand corner will be a time period filter. You'll be able to click on the pencil icon, open up the filter, and choose a specific year, a quarter, or a month. You can also use the calendar view if you're looking for specific dates, not only for end of the year reporting, but in general. So make sure that if there's a time period, you adapt it to your needs. If you're not seeing a time filter at the top right-hand corner, that's because it's a dashboard. So that's just a little tip for me. You'll see that the four basic filters, lead recruiter, location, department, and position, are all filtering into each other, meaning if I will choose and filter one specific lead recruiter, it will necessarily impact the locations, department, and positions presented in the report. You can also filter by hiring manager, and some reports will also have the option to filter by source type and source names. Also, another thing to note is that pool positions are not included as a default within Comeet Insight reports. So you also shouldn't be making any hires in those pool positions, because the goal of them is for them to be pool positions, not active. And also, if you do decide to include them in your reports, you can click here on the edit and change it accordingly. So that's a little bit about Comeet Insights. I want to go back just for a second to our presentation and sort of focus on our first topic for today. So our first topic for today is results. Okay, the first thing that we're interested in showing you today and discussing is where we can find the results that we would want to showcase at the end of the year. How many hires did we make and how much time did it take it to complete those hires? And before we actually see those two reports that address these topics, which are the hires report and the time to hire report, I want to just mention and remind you how these KPIs are calculated. So KPIs in Comeet regarding hires are all calculated based on your openings. As you all know, when you open a position for the first time, you'll choose the reason for the new opening, if it's a new replacement or temporary replacement, and you'll also assign the open date, which will be the date that you open the position for the first time. Now, each opening that's open, let's say if it's opened in a specific date, let's say, I don't know, October as an example, the system will assign you with an expected hire date of 60 days forward. That's a default in the system. This date is also taken into account into reports, and we'll address it in one of the reports that we'll cover. Once a candidate applies in the system, we'll mark that date as their application date. Once we mark them as hired, that's their hire date. And when you hire a candidate in Comeet, you're also marking when their start date is. When is their first day of coming into work at your company? And then you can see, for example, the apply to hire, time to hire, and time to onboard that's calculated. So apply to hire, which is how long it took us to move this candidate through the pipeline and workflow and hire them, but it's from their point of view. So it's mostly about the candidate experience from their application date until we mark them as hired. This is a time frame that we'll want to address and make sure that it's not too long. We have the actual time to hire over here, which is from when we actually opened the opening for the first time and until we clicked hired. This is an example of data that needs to be organized, and something here wasn't done correctly, because we won't want to have a time to hire shouldn't be shorter than the apply to hire. We'll address this in the report. And of course, we have a time to onboard, which is from the moment we opened the actual opening, the position for the first time, and until their start date. So that's just a small reminder that managing openings is really important. You should all make sure that each position has an active opening. If you made a hire, you should then either close the position or add a new opening. So we'll see these KPIs in the reports. The first report is the hires report. It's a pretty straightforward report. This report will include the data regarding all of your hires. As you can see here, we're looking at the year 2020 as an example. I can see the total number of candidates that have been hired, and I can see the average time to hire and the average applied to hire. These averages are across all of your positions for the selected time frame. And you also have the data regarding the median. So you want to make sure that the median and the average aren't too far apart, because that's an indication that you have outliers. So it's good to notice those two numbers. Below, you'll be able to see your hires over time per location in the graph, in the bar chart over here. You'll be able to hover over specific locations and see it in the graph, and you'll also have it in a distribution here by location in a pie chart. Another nice thing about the filters here that you, in addition to having the option to filter a location from the main filters on the right-hand side, you can also decide to click on a specific part in the pie chart. For example, if I want to filter out this entire report for all of my hires in London, I can click on that specific part in the pie chart. It will now update the report and show me only the hires for London. And it will also make sure to update the filter on the right-hand side here. So you don't need to remember where you clicked. And you'll also be able to choose clear selection and refresh the filters when you want to go back. I'm just going to refresh the report for a second to make sure that we're seeing it correctly. So just a minute, I'm going to click here, refresh, and I'll show you an example with another filter. Okay, let's give that report just a minute to load and we'll go back to it. We'll just move forward to our next report. So taking us back to our slide, now that we've seen the hires report, which is, as I mentioned, it's a pretty straightforward report. It will show you all of the data regarding your hires per location and department. We'll see it in just a bit. The next report that I want to show you is the time to hire report. So the time to hire report is specifically focusing with you on how long it's taking you to hire. And it will help you look at the average, median, and maximum across this specific piece of data, and you'll be able to see it for the entire year or time frame that you have selected. So we'll see the same number of candidates that we saw in our hires report. We'll be able to see the average, median, and maximum. So maximum is an indication maybe of an outlier or a specific hire that took too long. Maybe there's even data that needs to be adjusted accordingly. And below we'll have the line graph over here, which will show us the time to hire over time. So did we improve? Did this time to hire change? Were there a specific trend that we need to notice? We can see that the gray line will represent the number of hires and the blue will represent the average time to hire in days. So we can see throughout quarters if we impacted this number and if we were able to make adjustments throughout the year. Below, you'll have time to hire by department. The time to hire by department, the bar charts will represent the average, median, and maximum time to hire, while the gray dot will represent the number of hires in that specific department. Next, you'll have the same graph by location and also the time to hire by lead recruiter. Again, if you're working in a large organization, you have a large team, a large amount of location departments, and you want to drill down a little bit, you can always use the filters on the right-hand side. For example, time to hire by position, if I were to see it for all of my positions, I would need to expand this view, this scroll chart at the bottom, and you can see that it's not very effective. So our recommendation is to use the scroll bar and then really select a smaller group of positions to view. You can also scroll it to the right and just move it along to see the different positions. Below that, you'll have also a full list of the time to hire position by position per candidate. So you'll have the name of the position, the name of the candidate. Of course, these are all clickable URLs. You can go straight to Comeet and view the data and that average time to hire that you have for that specific candidate. Let's go back to the hires report that I can see is deciding to give us some trouble. As I mentioned, it's a demo account, so I'll make sure to update it and we'll try to check it on a little bit later. So thanks for your patience on that. I'll try to open it from here as well. So let's go back to our presentation. So we talked about the results, right? So how many hires did we make? We saw that you'll have the breakdown by location and department, and you can also look at the time to hire and see the trend in comparison over time. Of course, you can use that to adapt your goals and decide what your KPIs for next year should be. The next topic is how did we get there? Okay, it's not enough to know how many hires we made and how long it took us. We really want to be able to showcase the volume of work, how much work was there, who did the work, how did the recruiters perform, how was our team engaged, how long did it take us to complete the different steps, how many completed steps were done by each team member. All of that data is in the reports that we're going to cover. And of course, before we really dive into the actual hiring team, it's important to look at the pipeline and say, okay, so we made a certain number of hires, and it took us this amount of time. Where did these candidates come from? How did our referral program perform? Which sources were effective? Which job postings brought in the most relevant candidates? And that's where we're going to start out, which is our sources quality report. So our sources quality report right over here, it'll be under the sourcing folder. By the way, the hires report, the first report that we talked about, is included in all of your accounts, and the time to hire, which is under the KPIs folder, that's an ultimate enterprise report. So just to make a quick note on that. So the sources quality report, again, can be filtered by a specific time frame, and it will start out with the basic details of how many applications you received, how many duplicates were removed. For example, you received the same candidate for the same position within a week from 2 different sources, and that duplicate was resolved, and so you 2 applications resulted in 1 candidate, and that's that unique number of candidates that we can see here on the right-hand side that you received throughout the year that you chose to view. We're looking at 2020, just a reminder as demo data. Below, you'll be able to see the candidates that were added by source type. So you'll also see the breakup in the pie chart on the left, and you'll also be able to see the candidates that were added by source type over time. So this part of the report is looking at source types. We're looking at agencies versus job boards versus referrals. We'll later on be able to drill by source name. I'll show you how to do that as well. You can see over time how there was different candidates coming in from different source types. For example, if you launched a very large social campaign, you might be able to see the results in this graph. If you had a large referral program or a large bonus that you launched, you would also be able to see the impact in this trend chart over here. Again, it's across all of your positions, all of your departments, and across an entire year. The next part of the report, which is the tables, there's actually 3 tables that start from a high level and drill down. And these tables are built exactly the same way. So I'm going to explain about the top table, and then you can do some exploring on your own. The source performance by source type is taking the details that we just saw above. We'll see the name of the source type on the left, the total number of applications. We'll see the duplicate applications removed by different source type, and out of that we'll also be able to see the percent of duplicates. And this is an important number because we want to make sure that we're working with agencies with paid headhunter services that are not sending us a large number of duplicates. So we want to see a low number of duplicates in this column and make sure that our sources are effective in that sense. Obviously, some sources are always going to have duplicates, for example, job boards, for example, referral programs. It's a small world, everybody knows everybody. So it's okay that you see these number of duplicates. We just want to make sure that we're not seeing a very high number for a specific source that could possibly be a paid source, and then maybe, it's not very effective for us. We'll then have the number of unique candidates per source type, and the next column will be the ones, the candidates that completed a first screening. So I'm going to remind you that the best practice is to have one first screening step, which is the first step in your workflow. It can be a CV screen recruiter or manager, but it should be a go, no-go step, because that's how Comeet essentially measures candidates that are qualified. Okay, that's that column over here. We're measuring how many candidates out of those who completed their first screening, that first go, no-go step, how many of them actually passed it. So if I have to give you a tip, and this is, looking at data that's at the end of the year, we want to make sure that the column of candidates matches the number in completed of our first screening. Ideally, we don't want to have candidates in the system that didn't go through any screening process, especially if we're looking at the end of the year. Okay, so if we see that we have a gap here, that means that there's candidates that we literally did not address, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen at the end of the year. We'll then see the percentage of candidates that were qualified. This is, of course, out of those who completed their first screening, how many passed. And since we're also looking at the end of the year, it's important to note that we also have the hired column over here. So we can see, regardless of where they came from, we can also see where we actually made our hires from. So if I have to sum up, like, the importance of viewing this table is to look at the duplicate column to make sure that we don't have a large number of duplicates. And we do have a large number of qualified. That combination, low percent of duplicates, high percent of qualified, that's indicating that you have an effective source. So that's definitely something you can do if you're looking also to look forward and decide which sources you want to work with next year and which sources you want to present in your end of the year reporting. The next tables will drill down, so you'll have the source performance by source name. You'll be able to compare the different sourcers, the different agencies that you were working with by name, and then you'll also be able to drill down by actual position, which is pretty interesting because you might be able to identify that there are specific sources that work better for a specific position, whether it's a paid posting that's relevant for a specific type of positions, or a headhunter, or any kind of other job post that you're using. So this is an important report in that aspect. If you have an active referral program, you'll note that Comeet also has a dedicated report for referrals. Over here in this report, you can see the number of referrals that you received. You can see the percentage of it in total in regards to the rest of your candidate pool, how many hires were made from the referrals. So it's a very useful report that you can use as well. In addition, for ultimate clients, we have a marketing campaigns report. This report is very specific. It's a report that can be used for marketing teams that have designated paid campaigns for hiring. And in that case, you'd be using UTM parameters. There's lots of information about it in our help center, and we have a short webinar about it. So if you have any interest in that and want more details, you can reach out to our support team. So we've talked about the sources. Okay, we've understood where we can see where the candidates came from, where did we make those hires, and we have the option to break it down by source type, source name, and by position. The next topic is the volume of work. So first, we're going to take a look at the hiring plan report, which will give us an indication of how many openings did we have at each point in time. This is a good indication because looking at the number of positions isn't necessarily enough. We want to make sure that we're looking at the number of openings, because I could have 2 or 3 positions, but if each position had a number of openings at the end of the day, I'm looking to hire that many people, and that would impact my volume of work. And then we're going to take a look at 2 reports. One of them is focusing on the recruiter's performance, and the other is focusing on team engagement. These 3 reports are all part of our ultimate package as well. Okay, so this is the hiring plan report. The hiring plan report starts out by showcasing in a bar chart the expected versus actual hires by month. So how are we calculating those expected versus actual? That's taking us back to the opening dates that we saw at the beginning, that each position is assigned with an expected hire date. The default, as I mentioned, it's 60 days. So any hire that wasn't made within 60 days will be counted as delayed in the system unless you're editing these dates, which is, by the way, a great recommendation. And you can definitely go ahead and start working with that expected hire date. You'll just need to click on the opening and edit it. And then you can adapt specific openings that you know will take you longer to hire or a shorter amount of time to hire. And in this chart, just like I mentioned, you'll be able to see how many expected hires were per month. So how many hires, meaning how many openings had an expected hire date in that specific month, and how many actual hires were done in that specific month. We can see it in a pie chart as well, broken down by department. And in any case, in any pie chart that you see in Comeet Insights, if you see others, you can hover over it and see that it's basically taking smaller groups and putting them in one specific pie chart. So you can see that breakdown over here. Next, you'll have the openings by target hire date. So for each specific month, it will show you how many openings were canceled in that specific month. You'll be able to see how many were hired on time, meaning within that 60-day period, or delayed. It could even be 63 days, but it would still count as delayed. And you can also see how many openings were open in that specific month that were not hired, that were open past their target date beyond that 60 days. And the graph over here is what I wanted you to focus on, because I think this can really showcase the volume of work in a very clear and straightforward way for your reports, is the open openings by department. So you can see here that it's showcasing how many openings did we work on every month. And in this view, the openings are counted every month until they are closed. So if I opened a new opening in January and hired in May, it will still be counted in each month until then. So it's showing you essentially how many openings you had open. In this graph, you can see it by department. You can see where most of your openings are at any given time. And of course, you can also see it by lead recruiter. So this is also indicating the volume of work that your recruitment team is dealing with. You can filter it again by lead recruiter, location, department if needed. And at the bottom, you have a full table. This full table is organized by target hire date. So it's starting out by January and will go forward month by month. Each month you'll have the name of a department, the name of a position. You'll see details about the opening, such as the hiring status. So if it was hired within 60 days, it will be hired early. If it's still open, it will be ongoing delayed. You can see hire delayed for those openings that were filled, but after the 60-day period. And of course, in some cases, you'll also be able to see the opening status, which will either be open, hired, or canceled. Okay, so if some cases you decided to cancel an opening, you'll have an indication then, and you'll always have the days open of each opening over here. Talking about exporting, which is something I mentioned at the beginning. So at the top part of the screen, you can export the whole entire report to PDF. When you export it to PDF, you need to make sure that it's A3 landscape. in the view settings. We'll make sure to include that in our summary. You'll also be able to export specific widgets. So if I want this specific graph, I can click the three dots over here and click download and download it as an image, build my own presentation. And anywhere in Comeet where you have a full table of data, just like here at the bottom, this table can also be downloaded, and this time you can do it to CSV or Excel for your own use. So that's just a little bit about downloading those reports. So now that we saw the volume of work across departments in terms of the openings, I want to go to our next report, which is our recruiter's performance. The recruiter's performance report, basically the goal here is to be able to showcase the different data according to the different recruiters. So we want to focus on the lead recruiter in your team. Obviously, each lead recruiter has their different positions that they're in charge of. And this report will include the duration of openings and steps that affected both the candidates and the time to hire. So these are really important numbers. It's also good to keep in mind that these numbers are addressing all of the candidates in all of the positions that include all of the hiring team per lead recruiter. Okay, so it's not necessarily that specific recruiter, but it's everything that happened in their positions. With the first part has the time to hire and apply to hire, with also the number of hires. Here you have the option to see per recruiter, both the time to hire, which is how long it's taking to fill a position, and also the apply to hire, which is how long candidates are in progress. We want to make sure again that the apply to hire isn't too high. Next, we have the average step duration. Average step duration is looking on average how long it's taking to complete each step in the process according to step type. So how long it's taking to do screenings, which would be the go, no go steps, how long it's taking for phone interviews, video interviews, and in person. Obviously, some of you are using administrative steps, and how long it's taking to complete offer steps, which are also a step that we want to make sure that's not taking too long, because if we've made a decision to move forward with a candidate, we might as well complete that as soon as possible, give them a good offer, and make sure that they're decided to sign and join our company. Next, we have the interview step duration breakdown by lead recruiter. And in this case, we're looking at two aspects of interviews, which we'll now see in additional reports, which is how long it's taking us to interview and complete the step, but also how long it's taking to fill in an evaluation. And that's something we actually have control over, because sometimes scheduling can take time, whether because of logistics or technical reasons. We need the candidate to be available for the call. We need the manager or the interviewer to be available as well. And sometimes scheduling can take time regardless of the situation. What we do have control over is how long it's taking us to fill in evaluations. Whether it's the hiring manager, whether it's the lead recruiter, we want to make sure that filling in evaluations doesn't delay the process. And so that's a number that's important to address. We'll see that also below in this table and in the next report that we're going to jump into, which is the team engagement report. So at the bottom of the recruiter's performance report, you have the interview breakdown by teammates. Here I'll have a list. It will also, of course, be by lead recruiter. So if I'm looking at Aiden, I can see all of the interviewers that took part in their positions. I can see per interviewer how many interviews they completed. You can see the division by in-person, video, and phone. So if I'm looking, for example, at Ellie over here, I can see that they've completed 12 interviews. 6 of them were video interviews and 6 of them were phone. I can see the pass-through rate, and this is an average pass-through rate for all 12 interviews. This is also an interesting number, because if we want to address this, we can discuss internally if we have and identify if we have a step that the pass-through rate is very high. Is it a redundant step? Should it be placed somewhere else in the workflow, or is it a good indication that we're on the same page and we're moving relevant candidates forward in the workflow? Or do we have a maybe step that has a very low pass-through rate? And in that case, we would maybe want to make sure that we're aligning with, the managers, and maybe it's good for us to have a low pass-through rate for a specific step that should be more technical, maybe should be more difficult. So it really varies between companies and positions, but it is a good number to be aware of and pay attention to. Here you can see also the time to complete. This is the average time it took this interview to complete all of their interviews. 5 days is actually a nice number. Again, like I mentioned, the time to complete, because we're taking into consideration scheduling, it's measuring from the moment this task was assigned to the interviewer until it was completed, and that includes scheduling in the middle. So if scheduling is delaying you, that's again something you want to address, but that can happen if it's a specific season, if it's a holiday season, if it's summer vacation season, things will be delayed regardless. And what you do have control over is the time to submit. Okay, which is how long it's taking your interviewers to submit their interview evaluations. That's a number you definitely want to have control over, and you want it to be as low as possible. The next report is the team engagement report. So we just took a look at the recruiter's performance report, and we saw some averages in terms of the step duration and the breakdowns. And here we're looking at the whole entire team. And because you might have a very large team and a lot of people taking part in the interviewing process, it's a good place to maybe start filtering this report. So the team engagement report could, for example, maybe be filtered by location or by department or even by lead recruiter to make sure you're not seeing too much data in one place. Sometimes if we look at data that's too high level, it'll be hard for us to really understand the numbers and be able to get to specific conclusions. The first part of the report is the number of steps completed by each teammate. Okay, this includes all the teammates, hiring managers, lead recruiters, everybody. And again, we have a scroll bar chart that we can change the view. It'll be probably more easy and comfortable for you guys to make it a shorter view. Then you can scroll down accordingly. And here we're basically seeing the breakdown of steps completed by each one of the teammates that we are seeing here in the time period. So if you're seeing it on a yearly view or weekly view, the numbers will vary accordingly. And we can see here the different step types at the bottom. So if I want to look only at video interviews, you can hover over that number. You can click on it to filter the report. That's also an option. We next have three different tables. These take the numbers that we saw in the recruiter's performance, but break it down a little bit more and give us more detailed outlook. The first table is the time to complete. So we're looking at how long it took each teammate to complete the steps that they were in charge of. Again, these are averages and they are including all the steps completed by those teammates. And here we're also breaking it down by the different types of interviews. So we're looking separately at phone interviews, separately at video interviews, and separately at in-person interviews. We can see how long it's taking to complete that step. Again, this could take a couple of days or even 2 weeks if we're, in between holidays and have scheduling that's challenging. But the time to evaluate is the number that we want to make sure that we're addressing. Okay, we want to make sure that the time to evaluate is low, that we don't have any cases where it's taking 8 days, 15 days for a specific teammate to fill in their interview evaluation, because that's really stalling the process. And I think the goal is to fill in those evaluations as quickly as possible. Also make sure that the top candidates are addressed accordingly and we're moving, as quickly as we can with them in the process. The next table is the pass ratio. So we want to be able to identify what's the pass ratio per interviewer. We can identify, for example, go, no-go steps, which are, usually used for screening. They could be used potentially for, assignments and other steps, but most of you are probably using it for CV screens. And then we want to make sure that, the screening, the pass rate, maybe it's a little bit lower when it comes to recruiters, because that's the first step and we want to screen as much as possible. We want to make sure that's happening as well. And then we can see the pass rate for phone videos, and video and in-person interviews will be together in one column over here. And next we have the time invested in interviews. So if we're speaking about results and we're speaking about how we got there, the volume of work and the time invested in interviews is an important number. We can see by teammate how many hours they invested per type of interview and a total number of hours. So this is also really interesting for you guys to take a look at as well. Just again, going to remind you that you can filter this report. All of the tables can be exported, and you can definitely use this both to showcase the volume of work and to also maybe identify those gaps where it's taking you maybe too long to interview, it's taking you maybe too long to submit evaluations, and address that when you're looking forward at next year. So going back to our presentation, the next thing I wanted to talk to you about today, and this is actually a very important topic, is celebrating success and identifying opportunities. So, here at Comeet, I can say on my behalf and my team's behalf, we know how hard you all work. We know how important recruiting is to the success of a company. And, we're hand in hand with you throughout the year, seeing how hard you work, seeing the volume of work. We understand your challenges. And, the end of the year is a good time to say, you know what, before we talk about next year, before we identify the gaps, it's time to say good job. It's time for a pat on the back, whether it's for yourself, your team, your teammates that are working with you in the hiring process. It's really important to take that, 1 minute, 10 minute, 1 hour, it's up to you, and celebrate the success of your team. You've all worked very, very hard, and there's a lot to celebrate. You can talk about the number of hires that you were able to make in the past year. You can look and address the time to hire and see that you've improved the time to hire over time. Or you can look at the effective sources, the fact that you were able to identify effective sources, whether it's a social campaign or a referral program. That's all up to you and your recruitment team. And of course, the volume of work itself is a reason for celebration. I really did want to take a moment and to address this in this webinar, because we really, we're really there for you. We really can see how impactful your work is, and both for you and for your management, it's really important to take that time and pat yourself on the back, as mentioned. We're all critical. We're all going to look to improve and to be better next year. But before we do that, we should be proud of the work that we've done. For this specific topic, we do have a report. It's a very high-level report. It's called the quarterly report, and it's in your upper management folder. Just wanted to quickly show you that it takes data and sums it up on a high level. This can be really comfortable for exporting or using in your presentations. You'll be able to see your hires, your total hires, and your hires over time. You'll next be able to see the hires by department and location and pie charts, and of course, see new hires versus replacement hires, which also has an impact on company growth and on budgeting. Next, you have the average time to hire and over time. You'll have it by department and location as well. So you can celebrate this with the specific locations and departments that did a good job. You also have the hires by sources. So we're taking the top 3 sources that were most effective. And you can see here that most of the hires came through agencies and referrals in this case, and that the active search, which is our sourcing efforts, were also very impactful. And then you'll see the hires by source type and over time as well. So this is a nice high-level summary report that you can use when reaching that celebrating success slide in your end of the year presentation. So great, so we've seen the results, we've seen how we got there, we've identified where we can look for more opportunities in growth, and the next step will be planning next year. So every company has their own goals and KPIs, and you can really use the data from 2021 to be sort of a starting point of your goals and KPIs for the next year. Decide to use those numbers and adapt your goals accordingly. That said, there are additional things that we wanted to raise today regarding planning 2022. One of them is obviously sources. At the end of the day, that's where our candidates are coming from. So it's really a good idea to use the reports to be able to identify effective sources, make sure you're expanding and diversifying your sources, whether it's identifying that there are sources you shouldn't be using anymore to save money and time, or diversify the sources to reach more different diverse groups of candidates. Automation is also a really big part of planning forward. Automation is also a big part of who we are at Comeet and who we aim to be as an ATS platform. There's different aspects of Comeet that enhance your hiring processes with automation, whether it's scheduling and you identify that that's a gap in the time that it takes you to hire. You can consider implementing and using Comeet's auto scheduling feature that we discussed in our last webinar 2 weeks ago. And of course, there's more information available via our support team. It can be custom email templates. It can be adapting the workflow to have more designated administrative tasks that prompt automatic notifications and reminders for your teammates. So whenever it comes to automation, we're all for, reducing the manual work and, freeing up your time for the more important and mindful tasks that you need to do. The third thing is candidate experience. I think employment branding and candidate experience is a big topic. You're all aware of this, you're all dealing with this. And there's a lot of opportunity to learn and grow when addressing the candidate experience. It could be by using the apply to hire report that really shows you how long it's taking on average from the moment candidates apply to the moment that they're hired, giving you a little bit of input on their experience in terms of the time frame. And you can also decide to activate the candidate voice survey feature that we talked about 2 weeks ago, which will give you really important anonymous feedback about your candidates. So any point in time that you can connect with your candidates and receive feedback from them, it's not only their feedback about the hiring process at your company, they're essentially also giving you a benchmark because they're probably in other different processes, and this is really valuable information. Your candidate experience impacts you in so many ways, so it's definitely something you can decide to focus on next year. And last but not least is assessment tools. So I'm sure a lot of you are using different assessment tools and you're always looking to improve and automate screening and in general, the whole process. So as many of you know, Comeet has various integrations with different assessment tools. They are all under the integrations menu in the settings menu. So feel free to browse there. We're adding new integrations all the time, whether it's a partner of us that can help you screen candidates, automate video interviews, any kind of coding tests. There's really a large variety, so I encourage you to check that. This is just a summary of everything we covered today. So just wrapping it all up, these are the topics that we covered. We covered what was the volume of the work, how many hires were made, how long it took, who did the work, how much work was done and by whom, and of course, where the candidates were coming from in terms of the effective sources. And we saw that we can do the breakdown by lead recruiter, by department, by location, and use the different filtering options to adapt to your needs, including the different time frames. Just before we dive into some Q&A, I'll give you a minute if you could all fill in your questions in the Q&A or chat. I'll be happy to answer them. And I would love your feedback. I'm going to launch another quick poll. We're always looking to improve and learn about your needs and experience from our webinars. So if you have just 1 minute to fill it in, it would be really great. It's 2 short questions, and we would really appreciate any feedback you have. If you want to give some written feedback through our support team. If you have additional questions, you're welcome to reach out to them. We really want to make sure that you're preparing for your end of year reporting and have all the data and tools that you need. So thanks for filling in the feedback. I'm going to give you another 10 seconds and we'll dive into some Q&A. Okay, so thank you for your feedback. Again, if you have any additional feedback that you want to share with us so we can continue to learn and meet your expectations, we'll love to receive it via our support team. So let's dedicate a few minutes to some Q&A before we let you go for today. I'm going to look at the Q&A and see some of the questions that you've added here. So one question here is how we can share the dashboards with the hiring managers, the business unit managers. That's a really, really good question. So first of all, I'm just going to remind you that in Comeet, I'm actually going to take you to Comeet to show you this. So in Comeet, in the top right-hand corner, your company name where it says teammates, that's the main menu of managing teammates, and you'll be able to manage this according to your permission in the company. If you want to give someone access, one option is to give them the management permission if they're, directors and you are comfortable with them seeing all of the positions, seeing all of the candidates and being, widely exposed to Comeet and it's relevant for them, they can have access to the reports directly. Make sure to use the see complete list of permissions table over here and make sure that you're not giving access to someone who shouldn't have such a wide access to the system. And the other option for you is to download the report. So you can go to the top of the report, click on the PDF icon, and then you'll change here the paper size to A3. You'll change the orientation to landscape, and you'll be able to save it, download it, and email them directly. So that's probably the best way to share those reports. Is it possible to see the time to hire for each specific interview stage for each department? So the time to hire is a number that's representing how long it took to hire one specific candidate. So it's a number that we're going to showcase per candidate per opening. So just to go back to that report, for example, if I open up my KPIs, I'll have my time to hire report. The time to hire report will be mostly to see things on a higher level, such as by department, by location, and by lead recruiter. You will have it by position as well. And this is actually something important to address because, for example, the algorithm developer could be one position, but maybe I hired 4 candidates. And so if I'm looking at 4 candidates, that means I'm looking at 4 hires and 4 openings. And so these numbers here would be the average of those 4 openings under that specific position. And you'll be able to see the exact time to hire per candidate. If you're looking to see the time it took for different steps in the process and you want to dive into the details and look at specific positions, you could look at the team engagement report that we were looking on before that looks at time invested in interviews, the pass ratio, and the time to complete. And in this case, you could go to the position filter and decide to filter a specific position, or if you want to drill down, you could do that by department and get an indication of how long it's taking the teammates in that specific position or department to complete the steps. So that's regarding those 2 questions. Great questions. Let's see if we have another question here. Okay, so this is a good question. Currently, we see the referrals by name. Is there an option to merge all the referrals under one group referrals? Very good question. So let's take a look at the sources quality report. We're going to go back to that. So as I mentioned, the sources quality report will showcase all of the sources first by source type. So you can see that referral compensated, which is the referrals that receive a bonus, and the referral uncompensated, which are referrals that are internal, for example, by a hiring manager, by a recruiter, that they're not going to receive a bonus for that hire. Those are two different source types. So you don't need to drill down and actually look by name. You can look at these 2 columns over here, which is the compensated and uncompensated. And in general, other report, for example, if I'm looking at the hiring report that we saw that wasn't updated correctly. Let's see another example. Other different reports will have the option to filter by source on the right-hand side. So if you're filtering by source, you'll be able to filter by source type and choose the referrals, and then you won't need to go one by one. So that, I think, is enough questions for today. I know this has been long and full of lots of information. So I think we're going to sum up for now. But again, I really want to encourage all of you to feel free to reach out to our support team following this webinar. After you've had some time to go through the reports, to dig into your data, I'm sure you'll have more questions. Feel free to reach out to them, send in your questions, so we can make sure you've got all what you need for the end of the year reporting. It's really great to see so many of you here, and thank you so much for joining. Just summing up sort of our next steps. So for all of you, this is the time to start defining your goals, decide what you want to showcase in your reports. Once you do that, you can identify the relevant reports and extract the data. And don't forget to make sure that you're cleaning up the data, that you're implementing our best practices, and of course, having an internal discussion. And don't forget to also use the data to celebrate your success and identify opportunities. It's really, really great to see all of you here today. And thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.